And you've probably all just got a little notification to say about that. And then I'm going to hand over to Claire and Alexia, who are going to tell you a little bit about PlastiCity.
Thank you, Jake. If you could go on to the first slide, please. So today I'm just going to give you an overview of the project, just to give you some context of what we're doing and what we want to achieve through these workshops. The aim of PlastiCity is to find ways to enable businesses to reduce and recycle more plastic waste, and also to play a bigger role in the local circular economy. Next slide, please. We are part of a European consortium, so we work with three other European countries. We've got Southend is us, we've got Ghent, The Hague and Douai, and we're across the Two Seas region, which is part of the English Channel. The project is funded by the European Regional Development Fund, and this collaboration is so unique. It allows us to share knowledge with a large group of British and European experts working in the plastic value chain. Next slide, please. So the focus of the project really is to look for lost plastics and giving these lost plastics an opportunity. What are lost plastics? These are plastics that can be recycled but are not currently being captured in existing schemes, or they are plastics that are eligible for recycling, but there's no schemes locally available to collect them and recycle them. What we want to do is work on this project is to develop business plans to capture the plastics that can be recycled and almost work on a scheme that can see their value being realised. Next slide, please, Jake. In PlastiCity, we work with something called the plastic value chain, which you may already be familiar with. So the plastic value chain involves stakeholders that we've identified that get involved in the plastic recycling process, and you might be able to identify yourselves on this. But all of these stakeholders somehow need to work together to unlock the value of plastics for recycling. And for us, it's important to identify and engage with these actors to realise if we can identify opportunities and synergies for developing business cases. So knowing who these actors are in a local context is really important for us, and what role they play. It really helps with the future development of business cases for lost plastics. If you go to the next slide, please, Jake. Thank you. So this slide shows, it's an overview of the project, so it's high level, but it shows what we're trying to do and what the process is that we've followed in PlastiCity. And all of these activities involve collaborations with the value chain. So we've got mapping at the start. The mapping exercise is where we look to see who's in Southend, what they're doing, what waste they're producing, and how they feel about plastic recycling, what the challenges and barriers are. Then we look further into what collections are going on in the logistics scenarios. So we look at what's going on at the moment, and also we model alternatives for these as well to see if we can find more environmentally friendly alternatives and more efficient alternatives. Then we have worked with our partners at the University of Ghent to develop a mobile plastic testing laboratory, which is quite smart. So this testing laboratory takes in the samples that we collect from Southend, tests them to see whether, what polymers are involved in these samples, and looks at their recyclability. And from that, we can decide what lost plastics we're going to choose to develop our plastic recycling hubs. So across all 4 regions, we're all developing physical recycling hubs. And the purpose of these hubs is to collect lost plastics that we will work with the value chain to feed into the development of business cases, which we hope will feed into the development of new products. And ultimately, our aim is to communicate and engage with the local actors in the value chain to make sure that they understand what we're doing in the project and also benefit from their knowledge and experience. And if you go to the next slide, Jake, I can show you what we've done in Southend. So this is kind of a timeline from the project start, which was in 2019, until when the project ends in 2023. And it kind of gives an overview of where we started and where we want to get to. So in the beginning, we developed a strategy. We mapped our actors and understood our landscape. We started to develop relationships within the value chain. We assessed behaviour so we could deal with communications and marketing. We looked at what's inside the bins. We then tested the samples of plastic to understand whether they could be recycled. And from these samples, we identified what lost plastics we were going to focus on. Once we had that focus, we worked with local actors to develop recycling hubs. And this brings us to where we are today, which is developing business cases. So we have worked with a series of different actors in the chain, as Jake said earlier on, to get some plastic product, some plastic feedstock that we want to present to you to get your feedback on. And hopefully we can then design these into new products or have a business case for that. At the end of the project, we will demonstrate all that we've done in a roadshow, so we can say what's possible, and we can produce this business case and a feasibility study for the future. And I think that's my turn now to hand over to my colleague Alicia, who is going to explain in a little more detail about the plastic landscape in Southend.
Thank you very much, Claire. So one of the first stages of the project was to create a baseline of current waste management practices and waste flows across businesses in Southend, with focus on plastic waste. In order to do it, we had to survey businesses to find out about the current waste management practices and also conduct the waste audit to get an insight about the qualities and quantities of plastic waste that is being generated in Southend. I just want to thank you to everyone that participated in our research and joined us today. So thank you for that. We use Google Maps to pinpoint each business selected for surveying, which were grouped by a standard industry code. 500 businesses are shown on the map, and we aim to target 50% of that. Can I have next slide, please? We found out from our survey that 52% of businesses in Southend had mixed recycling collection in place. Only 12% had a separate plastic recycling collection. 16%, however, did not have any waste collection set up. And we surveyed 212 businesses. Can I have an, oh, brilliant. The next part of creating a baseline and assessing the landscape was to find out about the qualities and quantities of plastic produced in Southend, which we did through the waste audit conducted last summer. Comprehensive collection was scheduled to fit all businesses. We analyzed the residual and recycling waste stream capacity and content. We identify common types of plastic and send the sample of plastic to our laboratory in Ghent that Claire mentioned previously to find out about the qualities of materials disposed of in Southend. These are some of the examples of plastic that we found during our waste audit, and we can see crates, baskets, buckets, film, crisp packets, and many more. We scaled up our result from the waste audit and estimated that Southend businesses produce a total of 4,500 tons of plastic each year. 28% of that comprises recyclable plastics like pots, taps, and trays and bottles, which are widely collected in standard collection. The remaining 72% are plastic that are not widely recycled, but have the potential to be recycled if collected in the standard collection. To explain this a little further, I have the following breakdown, which only includes the 4 most abundant arising plastic groups in Southend. We found that widely collected plastic, like plastic bottles and pot taps and trays, comprise of 15 and 17% of the annual plastic arising. Plastic monofilms comprises of 30% of annual plastic arising and are the most abundant plastic type found in our research. Plastic monofilms are recyclable, however, are only accepted by few waste management companies. This is due to technical challenges and a lack of infrastructure to process them. This makes those plastic not widely recyclable, unfortunately. We identify film as lost plastics. Our partner in Ghent is focusing on films to find solution for collecting and processing them. Southend, however, is focusing on rigid plastic, which are the last most abundant plastic group we identified during our audit. Can I have a next slide, please? Thank you, Jake. So the work we are doing as the project is ultimately to improve the recycling rates of lost plastics in Southend. During the waste characterization research, we found that only 17% of all recyclable bottles, pots, taps, and trays were correctly disposed of within the recycling stream. We also found that 1,050 tons per year of widely recyclable plastics are disposed of in the residual waste stream. The lost plastics make up of 31% of the composition of the plastic waste in the residual waste stream. As PlastiCity, we are working on the strategies to improve the recycling participation in existing schemes, but also find solutions for the lost plastics that are recyclable but not currently collected. I will hand back to Claire, who will explain how we communicate our work to a wider community. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Alicia. That was really good. So to bring around real change in the plastic landscape, we need to get the actors in the value chain really involved in and engaged in the project to understand aspects of the circular economy that relate to lost plastics and the development process that will really harness the value of plastic waste as a resource. So if I have the next slide. Thank you, Jake. So on this slide, this is just a few of the things that we will be delivering over the next year. So we've got the workshops, which are us at the moment. So we've got a few workshops that we're doing this year, and we will also provide circular economy training resources. We're doing a bit of work with schools and the community. So we will be providing educational support and resources in that area. We're developing a web platform for knowledge sharing and collaboration. So this will be available to all businesses in Southend and beyond. And we're also developing a pledge, which we'd like to introduce, which is for businesses and schools to sign up to reuse, reduce and recycle more plastic waste. So that's something that we would like to encourage across Southend, and we will support people with that pledge as well. So to give tips, guidance and ideas as to how they can make positive changes within their businesses. And that's it for me. So thank you for listening, and I'll hand over to Jake. I think we're going into breakout rooms.
Yes, we will be in just a minute. Thank you, Claire and Alicia, for all giving that overview there. Hopefully that means that everyone has a bit of a better understanding for what the PlastiCity project is all about and the work that's been going on so far. I see there have been a few questions popping up in the chat. That's brilliant. If you can keep any questions coming in, it's sort of throughout the team, we will be answering those in the chat. And if there's any of the sort of co-facilitators here, if there's anything that you feel needs to be addressed, let me know and we can discuss that as well. But keep popping any questions in the chat as we go along. So now we've got a bit of an overview about the project. We want to go on to an activity called Draw the Present. So normally if we were in person doing this for a workshop, we would have big pieces of paper and we'd be out physically sketching things. Because we're doing this online, we're going to simplify it a little bit. We're going to have discussions, and in breakout rooms, facilitators are going to take some notes about what's discussed. So the whole idea of the activity is to explore the relationship that your business has with plastic waste. Now, if you are not from a specific business or you think that there isn't any waste, if you think there isn't any waste, try and think really hard about it. It might even be small things that if you're a freelance creative, for example, you might use single-use water bottles or drinks bottles sometimes. That would be classed as a form of business waste. So think really, really careful about those. If you really haven't got any examples yourself, or you're possibly a student, not part of a business, maybe think of somewhere you've worked previously. Maybe it's somewhere you shop or somewhere else that you engage with that you might be able to think of examples, and ultimately try and help tease out information from the other people in your group, and the facilitators will be helping with this as well. So what we're trying to really look at is things like, what plastic waste do you produce and what sort of quantities? How is that waste currently being disposed of? So do you have a recycling collection? Is it mixed recycling in with your paper and metals, or is it separated? Do you have no recycling collections at all? Do you use plastic waste anywhere in your business operations, either your own plastic waste that you generate, or are you taking plastic from other businesses or recycling streams to create something? And finally, what are the priorities for your business? These don't just have to be around plastic and waste, but generally as a business, what are you trying to achieve? So in a minute, we'll put you into breakout rooms. I think we've got 3 groups of 7, David just said to me. Each will have a facilitator taking notes. When we come back, we'll ask one of you to just give a very, very brief summary of what's mentioned, if there's anything particularly interesting. Just before we do that, let's have a quick example. So a commercial kitchen might be for a restaurant, let's say. Some of the plastics that they might use and frequently have as part of their waste might be fresh food delivery trays. Alicia showed an image earlier of one of those blue sort of baskets. They're quite common for delivering fresh food. Polystyrene cool boxes used for frozen food, they're often single use. Condiment bottles and tubs, so the big tubs, you see huge things of mayonnaise and things like that in them. Films and wrapping, so cling film being an example of a monofilm that was mentioned earlier. Gloves for food preparation or cleaning chemical bottles. These are all things that are quite regularly used and quite regularly go into the waste stream from a commercial kitchen. And they might have recycling in place. You would hope so with the amount of plastic that's there. But they might be putting it into the general waste, or some might be returned to the distributor. So for example, there are schemes for cleaning chemical bottles to go back to the brands that supply them for refill and resupply. Some of those things might be used within their own operations. So big condiment tubs. I know when I worked in a kitchen quite a few years ago, they were used for storing fresh fruit when it had been brought in those crates. It was then an easier way of storing it. So they had their life extended and reused in the operations. And their priorities around keeping food fresh, reducing waste, because food obviously has a value, it's an asset to these restaurants. Also about hygiene and having quality produce. So hopefully that serves as a bit of an example of the kinds of things that we're talking about. David, would you be able to set us off into the breakout rooms? If you have any questions, feel free to ask them to facilitators. If they're not sure, they can just drop me a message as well. David, are you able to do that for us?
Yep, that's fine. I will put us into 3 breakout rooms. Myself, Jake and Natalie are going to facilitate, supported by Alicia, Claire and Yasmin. We'll see you in about 10 minutes. That's right, isn't it, Jake?
Yeah, 10 minutes time.
Okay.
Hello.
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 I'm just wondering if David has made a mistake in that Claire, Natalie and myself are all in this room.
Yeah, I think he might have done.
So I'm just going to have a quick look to see if that's the case. But what I'll do is, in the meantime, share my screen again, which has got the questions on it. Natalie, would you be able to begin as we discuss?
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just find the slides. Yeah, do you want me, I was going to say, do you want me to share? Because if you're going to be taken out into a different room, would you want me to?
I'll be sharing for a moment, and then if it goes.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay. So I will take some notes on here. Okay, so I think to save time, Jake, you don't want us to do introductions, do you, or do you?
No, if everyone would be able to pop their cameras on, it'd be really useful just for while we're in breakout rooms, so we can see everyone, and maybe say who you are, what you do very briefly as you start to discuss any of these things. Is anyone who'd like to start?
Sure. I'm Ben from 3D Filaprint. We're a 3D printing company based in Southend, and we have a wide variety of plastic waste that we're looking to be able to better recycle. We have material waste in terms of 3D print support materials. So once an object is printed, sometimes if it has an overhang, you need a support material that can be recycled. The filament itself that is 3D printed comes onto big plastic spools. A lot of companies are moving towards cardboard ones, but some brands are still on plastic ones, and they're made out of ABS oil-based plastic, and there isn't a very good, efficient way to recycle them at the moment. And some of the waste materials we have are difficult to know whether or not we can put them in recycling, or if we need to go to specialist places.
Brilliant. And you said it's about using recycled plastics in your operations. Obviously, I know a little about what you do. Some of the filaments you supply.
Yes, we have two main varieties of recycled plastic: PLA, which is biodegradable recycled plastic, and we have PETG, which is a form of PET, which is like what plastic water bottles are made out of. That's recycled and then can be recycled again back into your pink waste bin bag. So you can create like a circular economy with PET and PETG.
Fantastic. Who else have we got in the room?
Shall I go next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gordon Fergus. I've got a couple of interests here. I get a small consultancy, but I do the majority of my work for Veolia, managing their team that bids for local authority contracts, and in a development role. So I've got a Veolia sort of interest, but I also run a reuse business that has a reuse shop in Southend, and we're also a community interest company that's got a bike project in Southend. So I'm interested from developing recycling facilities, either on a large scale as Veolia or on a small scale as community reuse or circle round. And I've got some experience. I volunteered setting up a micro scale plastic recycling plant in Indonesia. But I say micro scale as in a few hundred kilos at a week sort of scale. So I'm interested in that.
Fantastic. Really, really interesting. So I suppose you're from your background, not a waste producer, but a waste processor, really. Yes. in the main.
Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant. Great to have you on. Who else have we got? Anyone else to contribute? So I can't see your properly now.
It should be Donata.
Yes, hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm not really from the Southend Council, but I can provide my experience. So that is mainly I'm trying to reduce as much as possible and to switch to reusable, repairable, refillable something, and particularly also on prevention of waste. What I started to do 3 years ago is to build a baseline of the general waste that I produce as a business, and also the plastic recycling, well, recycling in general. So now I have my baseline since almost 3 years now, so I already know how much I produce every year, every month. And what I'm trying to do is to reduce as much as possible. The biggest problem for me is films and wraps, because there is no option to find a place around where I work to find a supermarket that is collecting this kind of plastic. So I mean, with the bottles, I'm pretty good because I'm switched to glass bottles. I switched to refillable bottles. I use reusable coffee cups. So on this side is very good, but on the wrappings and the films is pretty bad. I don't see a lot of options around at the moment for me, and this is really sad.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I think it's definitely something that we've encountered through the project, and looking at it, is that there are many less options for wraps and films, and especially in the UK, that we know that with the partners on some of the other projects, especially in Ghent, that it was quite easy for them to find someone who was able to facilitate film reprocessing. Within looking locally at Southend, we were able to identify a couple of processes, but only dealing with sort of industrial waste. So it was only,
I can imagine.
The cleanest sort of perfect material.
It is sad in some sense, because I mean, you have stakeholders that are happy to to contribute to reduce the carbon footprint, to do something useful for the environment, but you don't have the opportunity to use this infrastructure and these plants.
Fantastic. Okay, and just one moment, Claire, would you be able to drop out of this room, and you should be able to join the breakout room that Alitzia's in? I think Alitzia might be on her own at the moment.
Yep.
So I'm just getting that sorted. And who else have we got? We've got someone else there.
Yeah, hello, I'm Caroline. I'm from Southend Adult Community College. So here at the college, obviously we're working with a range of learners, different ages across the community. And we're interested really, we're having a sustainability drive to partly to help to educate the learners, but also as an organisation to you know, to get involved in more recycling activities. We already recycle paper, and we're signed up with a scheme to do some more recycling of crisp packets and sweet wrappers as well. But the other side of it that we're interested in is developing courses that are about using recycled materials as well.
Fantastic. And I imagine there's lots of different types of waste being produced by the colleges there.
Yes, yeah, there is a reasonable amount. I think we're not in the size of a school, and we're not generating the waste that perhaps a school would be. And I think we're reasonably good at the moment at you know, the resources that we use. But it's a really good exercise for us to have an extra check and see what we're using and how we're using it, how we're disposing of it.
Fantastic. And so if we think about, if we jump down to what any plastics being used in your business operations, obviously Ben's been able to say a little bit about what 3D Filaprint do in terms of supplying some recycled filaments. Gordon, is this anything that sort of you have experience of with the reuse work that you've been doing as well, or any sort of remanufacture work?
On plastic filaments?
Not in, sorry, specifically, just in generally across, you know, you mentioned about sort of the reuse elements of what you've done and other work with Veolia.
Yeah, no, the reuse that we do is on furniture and toys and things like that, not on, you know, not on single-use sort of plastic. That's just not been anything we've been involved in.
Okay, so not currently involved in any sort of remanufacture or anything along those sorts of lines.
No.
Okay.
I have looked in the past at on the small scale about, and I'm sure Ben knows, there's the potential of separating the PET and being able to put that back into filament that can be used for printing, but there's lots of challenges with that, with the technical side and the quality of the material. I've looked
so on the Vein event that we're having on March 9th, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to be bringing along a machine called a 3D Evo, which we're going to be recycling some material from a recycling center up in Liverpool as part of the PlastiCity and turning that into filament on a spooling machine live. We can show you the whole process and walk you through it if you'd like.
Cool. Good.
There is you can create low quality material that will still be good enough to make like a practical part with. It might not be as strong as like an unrecycled material because something that's more pure is going to bond to itself better. But you can still use it to create something like, let's say, a foot of a sofa that you can then paint. There are still use cases for it in 3D printing, and recycled 3D printing materials, they're getting more and more popular.
I think, and that's interesting because it touches on something we're going to mention later on, is about the kinds of products that are traditionally made from recycled plastics, and that kind of taking into account some of the quality issues that are there.
I think one of the areas that I'm interested in looking at is particularly on household waste sites, where we've got a reuse shop and we've got potential of some upcycling workshops, is linking in with recovering plastics and then putting them back in and having 3D printing on site. So if you need to make a switch or a foot for a sofa or something like that, then we can do that as part of it, but also it's the education side that people can come along and learn how to do that sort of thing. And be, because I mean, when I've looked at it from a cost side, it just, at the moment, it certainly doesn't stack up financially, but I think as an education piece and people be more engaged, then
my company does do like live hosted events. We might be, if you can give me your email address after this, we might be willing to come and do like a little showcase or anything.
Excellent. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think this is exactly what when we've been discussing with the PlastiCity team about kind of trying to link up people who've got similar ideas and, you know, ambitions to people that can realize them. So it's brilliant that we've got some of that going on already.
I think something people don't think enough about with recycled plastic is trying to think about how not to make something a waste product in the first place, like repairability and things like that as well.
Definitely, and it's something that we're going to touch on when we mention the design briefs, is actually designing for them to have a longer life than what kind of a product that doesn't consider the entire life cycle might. So that's something we definitely want to take into consideration with concepts generated through this project.
Perfect.
Okay, is there anything else that anyone wanted to mention on any of these other points in terms of plastics within your business operations at the moment, or anything from previous business experiences?
I think the barrier is often about the scale. So one of the areas that Veolia has is wheeled bins. So people's wheelie bins or boxes that are issued to residents in Southend.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities for recycling them, but they are not in Southend, and they are an articulated vehicle load at a time, and you need equipment of the size to shred wheelie bins. And it's how you can actually do something that's a lot more scalable to an area like Southend.
Yeah.
Rather than having a couple of facilities that support the UK because of the scale.
Yeah, I think definitely something that we've encountered looking at the project is, as you say, the scale of having enough volume initially, but then also having the equipment of a scale to deal with these larger items. And it's one of the things we'll touch on later, but about kind of looking at things like, for example, if you wanted to be shredding plastic pallets, you need a much bigger facility than if you're dealing with standard household waste that fits into a wheelie bin. So definitely something that's been encountered. And for some businesses, them potentially feeling that they just don't produce enough plastic waste to justify having a recycling collection. If they could only fill a wheelie bin every 3 months at a time, that's a very infrequent collection to organise. So brilliant. I see that we've got Claire's come back into this room, so hopefully Alicia's getting on okay in her.
There's no option for me to join it. If I go to join breakout rooms, it just comes up as this room.
Okay, we'll have to make sure that for the next one, David has put you in with Alicia, which will be on her own over there. So, okay, fantastic. I think we've just had a message from David a moment ago to say that we will be going back into the room in a minute. Was there anything else that anyone wants to mention? Natalie, anything you wanted to comment on from what you've heard? Oh, we can't hear you, Natalie.
Sorry, that's because I was on another screen looking at the form I'm putting in here for this. No, I don't think so. I just want to check I've got all the information correct for everybody. So if there's anything you want to add to that. Just in terms of the college, are there any other types of plastics that you produce that you can think of, just so we can add a bit more detail here? Or is it maybe?
I think it was for the recycling. It was the crisp packets and the sweet wrappers was the main one. Yeah, I mean we've got loads of pens, but I think as we discussed before, Natalie, it's kind of a one-off that we could, we might be able to fill something once, but we're not necessarily generating. Waste.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Can I ask?
Raymond is collecting pens. Raymond.
Yeah, in Southend, there are a couple of places actually that are collecting stationery, and that is something that we need to pass on to our schools and businesses that are participating in our hubs, actually. You reminded me.
Fantastic. We just had a message to say there's less than a minute left in this room. So, Gordon, was there something you started to speak?
No, it's okay. That's fine.
Okay, all good. No worries. Yeah, I definitely think, as we mentioned before, that kind of not having a regular volume can be definitely a problem. And I think it's something we've tried to look at with the sort of the business hub concept that we're developing as well, that kind of by consolidating some of that waste, it hopefully justifies the collections and gives a bit of practicality to it. So hopefully you'll be able to see a bit more about that as we go on to the next step. So we will be finishing up here in just a second. And then going to just stop this share. And next we're going to be taking a little look at kind of the circular economy, what's it all about, especially for plastics, how that can be applied. And then we'll talk to you a bit more about the hubs as we've started to mention here. And it'll be David and Natalie taking us through that. We've got a few more activities a little bit later on in the session. So if you want to leave the breakout room now, you should just have a pop-up to suggest that.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so people are slowly trickling back into this room as we go along. Just going to I see 8 people back in this room at the moment, so we'll allow them to come back in. Hopefully that means conversation is flowing and they've got lots of ways to discuss.
I think everybody's back, Jake.
Yeah, everyone back. David, I think we had a bit of an issue there in terms of the breakout rooms. I think Alicia might have been left on her own there.
Oh, sorry, Alicia.
Managed.
we were slightly overloaded with facilitators in ours, so might need to just make sure there's a bit of a reshuffle for the next.
David, if you could add me to Alicia's room for the next one, it's Claire, then I can join her in there. I tried to, but I couldn't get in there.
No, okay, fine.
Okay. Brilliant. So I hope you all had some really good conversations. Is there anything that anyone wants to feedback from the different rooms? I think if the facilitators are happy to do this, or if there's someone from the room that's happy to say, that'd be absolutely fine. Natalie, did you want to give a quick overview of some of the things that were mentioned in our room? Sorry, we can't hear you again.
Yes, sorry, that was me again. Yes, so we had a range of people in our room. We have a sort of a wide variety of waste being generated. So we have 3D filler prints, so they're generating 3D printing waste and things like ABS. We also have the college, and one of the issues that they have is the amount of waste that's being generated isn't necessarily generated on a regular basis. So that's one of the things that is probably going to be a common issue with a lot of businesses, is if you're not generating it regularly, there's no point in having a regular collection. So what do you do with that? Southend Adult Community College are taking part in our recycling hubs, which we'll talk about later. And so we're looking at collecting some additional materials from them. In terms of priorities for the businesses, the college are doing a bit of a sustainability drive and looking to develop courses for recycled materials. We had someone from a reuse shop. Their focus is mainly on reuse, but they have looked at doing some PET recycled filament before. They're also looking, Veolia are also looking at possibly incorporating 3D printing on site in one of their household waste recycling sites. So potentially for sort of educational purposes. But again, it came up with the scale being a barrier in terms of recycling. So for example, for Veolia's wheel bins that they are taking back. So if they're coming damaged and need to be recycled, that's a bit of an issue. Yeah, so I think that's our summary of us.
Brilliant. And David, from your room, did you want to give a summary, or was there someone who wanted to speak?
I will quickly give some feedback. It was a nice mix of people. We have a company that actually makes plastic and is trying to use reclaimed and secondary raw materials, as well as all of their plastic waste is currently being separated for recycling. We've got a couple of schools that are trying to separate as much as possible, but being slightly challenged by that, but both want to bring plastics into the curriculum and particularly demonstrate reuse and recycling. A gallery which is creating quite a lot of plastics, particularly around the film and the bubbles side of things. And because it's a shared space, the demand, or sorry, the opportunity for recycling is sometimes there, but not always pursued by people that aren't particularly interested in doing that, as well as there being some challenges around the practicalities of separating. We then also have got a student who's been doing some really interesting work around how we can include circular economy into, or plastics into a circular economy. And then quickly on our priorities, mix of trying to get customers to ask for reclaimed plastic rather than ask for virgin. Both schools want to try and reuse plastics in the curriculum, and also Michelle's school is looking for sustainable school status and using UN SDGs. And then the gallery really wants to reduce the amount of plastic used, so very much at the top of the circular economy hierarchy. So yeah, that's us.
Fantastic. And the final room, Alicia?
Okay, that's the fun one. So we had a lovely mix of people. Suzanne from Other Community College said that they try to recycle as much as possible, but they introduce as much reuse as possible. So they stop using single-use cups. However, polystyrene is still in use, and yeah, it's quite challenging for them. They also use lots of aprons and gloves, around 30 a week of each. And yes, the recycling of it's quite challenging. We also have Southend Tech, Andy from Southend Tech, and so this is a small company. They produce packaging, electrostatic packaging, and they have quite a lot of 3D printing folded items. So I think this will be a question for Ben, how this could be potentially recycled, what can be done with it. And we have Kim from Focal Point Gallery. They're doing as much as possible to recycle and reduce plastic. However, plastic films are the most used, or the stuff is wrapped in plastic films. We also have a design student. She's studying in South Essex University, but she's also working in Subway, and she had great concerns about the recycling in Subway because they have no recycling in place. They chuck everything to a general waste bin. They also use lots of gloves. So yes, I think it's another step to start speaking to the owners and try to convince them that recycling can actually save them money. Some of the business had mixed recycling waste, mixed recycling collections. I'm talking about Other Community College and Focal Point Gallery, and as I mentioned previously, Subway did not have that. Most of those participants are doing as much as possible to reuse plastic, and Focal Point Gallery has lots of workshops regarding reusing fast fashion. Yes, and Other Community College also is doing as much as possible. Suzanne said that she has a huge bag of plastic lids and she's thinking what she can do with it. So if anyone has any idea what can be done with it, please just advise Suzanne about it. And I think that would be everything from
Fantastic.
this. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So thank you all for giving the feedback there. I think the shock on a few faces I noticed when saying that Subway didn't have any recycling in place at the moment was quite telling. So quite a few people were surprised to hear that. It's also good to hear about the mix of people that are on the call. So yeah, really great to have you all involved. We're going to move on to a little section from David now. We've been running a little bit over time. So David, if you could keep it fairly brief, That would be ideal.
you,
And then we'll cut down one of the sessions later on as well, so it'll be a little bit quicker.
Yeah,
But
that's
I will
fine.
hand over to you now.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I'm going to make it nice and simple and just move you straight onto a little video, which is from an American presenter. And it's a really nice summary of what circular economy is. So rather than me spending hours trying to describe it, once Jake has actually got the screen share sorted, we'll play the video. So, and then I'll just talk to you very quickly about some of the business models.
Here's an idea. What if you never had to buy a light bulb again? Instead, you lease light, like you lease a car or an apartment. It's just one idea that's part of the circular economy. Before we can understand the circular economy, well, it helps to define the linear economy. Most organizations today operate in the linear economy, which is based on a take, make, and dispose model. So, for example, a light bulb company takes resources, like glass or metal, to manufacture its products. The company makes the bulb and sells it to a customer like me who uses it. Once the light bulb burns out, I dispose of it. It's likely neither the company nor I will ever see that light bulb again. For a light bulb company to make money in the linear economy, it tries to buy materials for the lowest cost possible and to sell as many bulbs as possible. This model operates as if there are infinite resources, like glass or metal, in the world. But you and I know that's not the case. That's why the circular economy treats materials like they're finite. A company in the circular economy doesn't just recycle products, but maintains ownership of them all along. So the model looks more like this: make, use, and return. Let's go back to the light bulb example. Instead of buying bulbs, this office in London leases its light from Philips Lighting. It signed a 15-year lease for the service and pays a fee each quarter. Philips still owns the actual light bulbs and provides maintenance and replacements when needed, no extra cost. This model gives Philips the incentive to produce energy-efficient light bulbs, and it saves the office money with fixed lighting costs. It's a radically different business model that makes companies more like service providers than sellers of a physical product. And it turns out lots of companies are looking for ways to get involved. Take H&M, one of the world's largest clothing retailers. It's working on a strategy to become 100% circular. The company collects old garments in its stores and recycles them. Since 2013, H&M says it has gathered more than 55,000 tons of fabric to reuse for new garments. Some governments are getting on board with the circular economy too. The European Union adopted an action plan in 2015 aiming to make supply chains, you guessed it, more circular. This includes everything from production to consumption, repair and manufacturing, and waste management. The point isn't just to become more green and create environmental benefits, there could be economic benefits too. One report estimated a shift toward the circular economy in the EU could increase GDP by an additional 12 percentage points by 2050. But moving from the linear economy to the circular economy also brings costs. Companies would need to redesign their supply chains and products in order for them to be used again and again. Manufacturers might be burdened when it comes to the actual logistics of disposing and recycling. A recent report found only 22% of UK companies are trying to generate value from products that are returned for reuse, recycling, or refurbishing. It's estimated the cost of transitioning to a fully efficient reuse and recycling system across Europe could be as much as 108 billion euros, roughly $130 billion. Cost is one thing. Changing people's mindsets is another. And that's what it'll take for the circular economy to go from an idea to reality for everyone. Hey guys.
Okay.
Thank you, Jake. So whilst Jake is putting the slide deck back up, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an introduction into what the linear economy is and what the circular economy is, and some of the radical transformative ways of thinking about materials. And whilst that wasn't entirely on plastics, and in fact there was only a very small amount of plastics, the concept of circular applies to different materials. So if we could have the next slide, Jake, that would be great. For those of you that are interested, which is all of you, of course, this is a definition, and this gives you an idea of essentially what's been just said in the video. So we want to move away from a linear system. I think one of the key things is that in the circular economy, we try not to use the R word, and the R word is recycling. Recycling is great, but it's not the top of the circular economy hierarchy. We need to prevent waste from arising. We need to redesign. And if we go on to the next slide, these are the 5 business models that we normally use to try and explore how we can embed circularity into different businesses and different systems. So we have the starting on the top right, circular supply, looking at the materials that are used in your manufacture or whatever you do as a business. So looking at whether it's fully renewable, if it is recyclable, great. Can you use biodegradable materials? Second business model is product life extension. How can you make things last for longer? Produce and service. So a bit like the light leasing. Can you turn an existing consumption model, i.e. you buy something, into a leasing and take ownership of the materials and reuse and remanufacture? Sharing is a really interesting model. There's lots of potential for sharing, particularly in businesses which are in similar fields. And then resource recovery, which is essentially the bottom of the hierarchy, but a lot of companies are doing this really well. How can we take waste products and turn them into something really useful and avoid it going for incineration and landfill? And that's one of the things that we want to achieve through this workshop. Jake, back to you, or Natalie, I think it is.
Fantastic. That was really speedy. Well, thank you for doing that. Just a quick note, I was mentioned in the chat, Ruth has said about disappointing to see H&M included in there as one of the retailers who introduced the micro season that sees 52 seasons a year creating fast fashion waste. Definitely true, and H&M have been criticised a lot for what they've been calling a circular system. You will be seeing more and more at the moment brands talking about circular. Not all will necessarily be using circular models, so hopefully with the information that David's given you, you'll be able to look at those with a bit more of a critical eye. So just a quick note on that before handing over to Natalie to talk about the...
Well, before you do, Jake, and I'll just add one addendum. Some of the big businesses are really taking this seriously. H&M are actually doing some really interesting stuff in the background. I'll give you a very quick one with BMW. BMW across the globe have adopted something called secondary first. They are now sourcing their materials for all of their cars, and the designers have to source secondary raw materials as a first principle. If they can't do that, they then have to justify why they're going for virgin materials. Very quietly done, very subtle, but BMW adopting that across the globe. Natalie, sorry, over to you.
Okay, I'll be speedy too. So I'm just going to give you a quick summary of part of the PlastiCity project that we're working on with schools and businesses. We're going to be setting up mini recycling hub trials for schools and businesses in Southend to look at the viability of collecting and recycling a greater variety of plastics. We looked at plastics that are already being collected from schools and businesses, and we did a bit of data analysis and had some discussions with Veolia and Van Werven, a recycler that we'll come on to a bit later. And we decided to try and offer a recycling trial to 6 schools in Southend, or 5 and 1 college actually, and to create a business recycling hub too. The trial for the schools is launching next Monday, and that's going to go on for 4 months, and it's going to include plastic recycling collections, a communications package, and some educational support materials for schools. The comms and education package help increase participation in existing recycling services, as well as the quantity and the quality of recycling that's collected, and to support the trials that we're putting in place. Next slide, please. Oh, you're on it already. That's great, Jake, thanks. So we're going to be focusing on hard to recycle plastics and some types of plastics that aren't currently being collected. Most schools have an existing plastics collection in place, which is sort of standard plastic materials like bottles and pots and tubs and trays, and some of them have carrier bags and films as well. We're going to work with those schools that don't have a plastics collection in place and try and get them to organise that with their contractors, so that in the longer term they can collect these materials. What we didn't want to do is duplicate what's already in place and collect what they're already collecting and potentially cause some confusion in the future. So we decided that we're going to concentrate on rigid and hard plastics and more difficult to recycle items like things like sweet wrappers and crisp packets. So we are going to be using, next slide, please. We are going to be using Veolia's ProCycle collection scheme to collect crisp packets and sweet wrappers with schools. And these are then collected by the ProCycle team and taken for recycling. There are quite a few different companies that offer these kind of difficult to recycle materials. Because Southend already have a link to Veolia, we were easily able to link in with this, but we're going to be giving the schools some more information about other businesses that do these kind of different types of recycling. So there's First Mile, there's TerraCycle, there's a company called Reworked, for example, that collects lots of hard to recycle items that you wouldn't have normally collected as part of a standard recycling collection. And next slide, please. Oh, you're on it, great. Okay, and we're going to be working with Van Werven to provide a rigid plastics collection, which is going to collect a whole variety of hard plastics that the schools might generate. These are generally going to be a kind of a back office collection rather than children bringing these items in from home. There are probably a lot more of these items than some of the schools might think about. Some of the schools are going to have a bit of a clear out and see what they've got lying around. So it could be things like crates and buckets and plastic chairs. We've got a whole variety of these types of rigid plastics that we identified that could potentially be generated by schools. I think on the next slide, there's a few more examples as well. Yeah, so we looked at all the different types of rigid plastics that they were, and then picked out some that would be most commonly generated within schools. So there's even things like Lego, and you could even use 3D printing waste, straws, glue sticks, keyboards, and we're also going to be collecting toys as well from the schools. And we're going to be launching a business hub sometime in March, and it will be a very similar focus to the schools, although we'll just be collecting the rigid plastics. What we're hoping to do is to secure a site on a business estate, and we'll be encouraging all of the businesses on that estate to participate. So these hubs are going to be testing the viability of collecting these types of plastics, how easy that is, how much material we might be able to collect. We're going to look at what barriers there might be, how well the schools and business engage with us, and how they participate. And as we move through these trials, which are going to end in the summer, we're going to be collecting lots of data and feedback from the schools and the businesses that we can report that back to PlastiCity team and out to other schools and businesses when the trials finish in the summer. That's my quick run through. Fantastic.
Thank you, Natalie and David, for both speeding through there, just having a check on the time. So we have been overrunning a little bit. That's me on the timing, so I apologise for that. So what we're going to do is, instead of doing this second part as an activity, we're going to have a quick conversation about it and give you an example using the commercial kitchen. So based upon what's now been heard about the hubs, if we go back to thinking about the draw the present activity. So we're not going to go into breakout rooms, but this is something for you to have a bit of a think about yourselves, potentially during the workshop or after the workshop, and we'd love to sort of get your feedback on that. So thinking about how any of the plastics within your operations could be recycled through the hubs. Are there any of the things that Natalie's just mentioned there? Did those examples maybe make you think of things that maybe you hadn't thought of in the first session, especially some of the things like piping and guttering, something you probably don't think of as being something that's part of your business, but it definitely is. Are they items that you dispose of regularly or infrequently, like those infrastructure pieces? Does participation or use of the hubs actually aid your business priorities, being part of that Southend local economy that we're working to improve upon? So if we look at the commercial kitchen example, all of these mentioned are items that could be taken through the business hub, for example. So those blue plastic delivery trays we spoke about, condiment tubs, things like chopping boards. So that's an example of something that has a much longer life, but a commercial kitchen will have an array of different boards, an array of different colours. They use plastic because it's fantastic as a material for them, especially in terms of keeping clean and being hygienic. But it also does have an end of life. And the cleaning chemical bottles as well could also go in through the hubs. And there's a high turnover of some of these items. Others might have a slightly longer usable life. Fundamentally, the key operations of the business remain the same, but it might allow for reduced waste to landfill, maybe a reduced cost in terms of recycling collections as well, or maybe it would justify the first time having some sort of recycling happening. Maybe they've not been producing enough volume before now, and this enables them to engage in a recycling system. And they're also indirectly supplying plastic feedstock for local remanufacturing processes, which might be part of a business ethos to contribute to the local economy. So, as I said, we're not going to go into the breakout rooms for that, because we're a little bit tight on time, but it's something for you to have a bit of think about, and we'll send out those questions as well, so you can see them too. Now, we mentioned Van Werven, who are sort of the processing partner on the project. So we've explained about why the project exists, how the plastics are being collected, and now onto how they're being processed. I wanted to show you a very short, quick video, which gives a bit of a summary of what Van Werven do, and then we'll talk about how this links into the plastics available for use. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a summary of what Van Werven do. And also, as a bit of a mention there to some of the circular value chains that David touched on in his section of the presentation. So what does this all come to? Is basically when we're thinking about designing concept products for the PlastiCity project, we're talking about 3 different types of plastics that we will be receiving back from Van Werven and will be made available as a feedstock material for manufacturing processes. For any of the product designers, polymer experts, or those who've got some knowledge about plastic, you'll have some more in-depth knowledge about this. We don't want to dwell too much on these properties at the moment. We can go into that more at the second workshop. At the moment, we really want to keep ideas as creative and very much concepts at the moment. Don't let the material restrict too much ideas. A lot of this is about matching up the relevant people. So it might be that someone has a very creative concept, but no idea of how that can actually be executed. And part of our role will be helping to connect those people together who have the right expertise with the ideas. So, but in terms of the material that's there, so we've got a regrind mix, which is polyethylene and polypropylene, or we have either of those separately. So polyethylene regrind or polypropylene regrind. We'll say a bit more about this in just a moment, but generally the properties of these, that they are very strong. They are shatter resistant and in many ways flexible. So if you think about the lid on a shampoo bottle, maybe, that hinge motion will usually be made from polypropylene, and that's because it's very good at bending without snapping. And that can be, there's very little stress resistance. That can be done lots of times before it becomes worn and broken. These polymers also have a high chemical resistance, which is why they're used for things like cleaning chemical bottles. And they're also good electrical insulators, as with most plastics. A couple of considerations, and these especially relate to the regrind rather than just talking about the polymers. So it's less refined than plastic pellets. So during a traditional injection molding or other sort of manufacturing process, the plastic pellets are usually a very consistent size and density, and they're of a very specific grade, so they have very specific properties. That's not the case with the regrind. There'll be lots of different grades. As you can see from the picture, which is a sample that we have from Van Werven, actually shows a great deal of variety. again, don't want you to get too hung up on this at the moment, but it's something for any of the manufacturers involved in the process to definitely be aware of. The other thing is that the colours are mixed, as you can see, which means that it's going to be opaque. You can have these plastics translucent, but in this instance, it's not, because you can't remove the colour once it's there. You can either be looking at kind of a multicoloured effect, or black or brown are the easiest colours to achieve once you have this mix, which can seem limiting, but we also think that the multicoloured option can give a bit of creativity there as well. And another consideration is that it may actually require a percentage of virgin materials, that's plastic that hasn't been used before, to be used in the process to reach desired properties. It's quite common for products to have a percentage recycled content. And if you're looking at something that needs to have very specific properties, that might be required. And that's something we are, sort of very much open to considering and looking at as needed. So moving on then to some example products. I'm just checking the time. Yeah, we're still playing catch up a little bit. But here's some things that are already being produced from recycled polymers. So things like street furniture, for example. These are either polypropylene, polyethylene. Actually, the bollards on the right are made from a mix, so it shows that this is possible to produce stuff from a mix. We have things like foundations or eco-grids and building lumber. These things are obviously often buried underground or hidden away, so the aesthetics are less important for them. But you can see that there are sort of quite a nice finish actually available on the lumber there. Things like bricks, and you've got two different examples of this being done in a very different way. The example on the left are made from polypropylene. It's a Dutch company that are creating these using very, very precise molds, using a very refined process and interlocking parts that, is quite an effective finish. And you can even see in those plastics there's a slight variation in some of the color too. On the right, these are mixed plastics that you can see. This is a project based in Nigeria, where they're using a much more rough, it's a handmade mold. The process is, again, I suppose, less refined, and the plastics are mixed within those. A couple of examples here are both from a company called Barrio. They're actually working with fishing nets, and this is a nylon material. So it's not the same type of material we're using as part of this project. But I think it just hopefully gives a bit of an idea that these things don't have to all be incredibly functional products. You can create fun things from recycled material too. And you can also create beautiful things. So the jewelry that's shown here, actually really embracing the mix of different colors that are involved in the regrind to create an effective finish, showing how that can be used as an advantage. One thing to note on these is that obviously it's a low stress process, a piece of jewelry. It's not something that moves or has a lot of weight pressed upon it. So the grading of the plastic is slightly less important. So that kind of opens up again for this sort of thing. Things like coasters or plant pots. The coasters are actually made from shopping bags, which is an example of film being reused. But the pots are again from a mix of polypropylene of different colours. Tables and chairs. Now we'll come back to this example in a minute as well, but it shows two different examples of how things are made in quite different ways, but both using recycled polymers. Phone cases, watches, these are both things with really intricate molds. So it would be quite expensive to create molds to do that. But maybe there's someone out there that is already producing a product that has the molds that might be able to use regrind as part of their manufacturing process. So that's something we're definitely open to considering and can come out in ideas. Now here's an example as well, which is one which we recently discovered that I think is quite interesting. These are golf tees that are being produced in a similar way to the values of PlastiCity in terms of a localized system that is sort of feeding itself. So what they're doing, they're based out in Australia in quite a small town, and they're collecting from a local scrapyard and a body shop plastic bumpers from cars. These are all polypropylene. They're not all polypropylene, but the ones that they're collecting are, and that's the majority of them. They've got a local shredder that is shredding up those plastics to create quite a rough regrind, as you can see in the image at the top. They're then locally injection molding those to create these golf tees. And then they're offering a system that they are taking them back if they are broken, and then they get reground. So actually, after their usable life, that process has also been considered, which is something that we'd really like to do in this project as well. So just moving on to the design briefs then, how does this all link into what we are talking about? So we have two design briefs. The first is creating products from polyethylene, polypropylene regrind, either forming, either mixed or separated. But again, at the moment, we're not going to focus too much on that. And the idea is to develop a product that has been manufactured directly from that regrind. So if you know much about manufacturing processes, that might be through extrusion, injection molding, compression molding, or other traditional processes. And the second brief is to create products from boards. So if we were to take that regrind and have some boards manufactured from it, what might you be able to design and create from those? And this might be using manufacturing methods such as CNC machining, or it might be handworking material. And so just on those boards, here's a couple of examples from a few companies that are already creating boards, some from slightly different materials. On the left and then the bottom picture are from a company called Reworked, and they're using a mix of different polymers. And the example in the top right is from a company called Smile Plastics, who again are using a mix of different materials, constantly experimenting, and these have been used for a whole different bunch of applications in shop fitting, as counters for creating furniture from. As we mentioned furniture, this is kind of, I guess, wanted to show the difference between the two briefs. The design brief 1 refers to something like the table and chairs that you see on the left. They're molded from a single mold, and it creates a single piece of plastic. On the right for design brief 2, it's about creating something from the boards, so cut in a certain way and then assembled. And I think hopefully is a nice way of showing the two different approaches of using recycled plastics to create a similar but ultimately different product. And that's something we wanted to give you the option to be able to explore with design briefs. So then we've got a few design themes to mention as well. These are kind of starter ideas, and you may have things that take off in a different direction, but trying to link concepts to one or more of these themes. So a product that is specific or unique to Southend in some way. Maybe a public installation or street furniture. We saw about the benches earlier and the bollards. Is there something along those lines? Could it be something educational? Could it be something that has a long usable life? Ideally, this is the case. We don't want to keep putting single-use items back into the system. We want to extend the life of everything that we produce, because energy goes into doing that each time that it happens. Do the products in some way support environmentally conscious activities? So another example product that we've seen produced before is litter pickers. So the small little parts, so the trigger effectively, and the sort of moving arm, often can be made from recycled plastics. Does a product have some relation to waste or litter? Is it a bin, maybe? Does it link into nature and urban greening and the circular economy? So David mentioned earlier a little bit about circular economy business models and value chains. And really just want to stress here that concept products, we don't want to be single-use or disposable items, because of all the energy that goes into remanufacturing those products each time, and the potential for loss at each point in the collection system. And then we've got some drivers. So sort of what are the products all about? Focusing around sustainability, circular value chains. Can they add some sort of social value? And definitely we want to be trying to add a local economic value through the products that are produced. And as a bit of a bonus thing to consider, like was mentioned with the golf tee example, considering the end of life processes for a product. So can they be collected, disassembled or ground down and recycled again at the end of their life? Does that potentially feed into a single system. So we were discussing this the other day, those golf tees, wouldn't it be great if there was bins on the golf course specifically for those tees to go into, so that they could go back to the manufacturer, and there was very little opportunity for loss to happen there, and they become part of a closed system. So we've got a couple of minutes. I'm conscious we didn't get to do the last activity in breakout rooms, so I wanted to give you sort of 5 minutes now, if we can, David, if we can get organized back into the breakout rooms again, to just have a little bit of a conversation about those two briefs that we've introduced. If there's any ideas that immediately jump out to you, any questions, anything like that, let the facilitators know. Either they'll be able to answer them straight away, or if they can't, we will have a discussion about them and let you know. And ultimately, hopefully it'll be helpful for everyone else in the room as well. While you're in there, if there's any ideas that immediately jump out, any of the examples that you really liked or thought weren't as good, try and have a bit of a conversation about that. So just for 5 minutes, David, are they ready, or?
I'll put you all in now.
So we're all just going to pop in now. Brilliant. So 5 minutes and we'll see you back here. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello again. I'm with you now, Jake. I think Natalie must have gone somewhere else.
Okay, let's hope we don't have too many of us from our side in here, but that does seem fine. I think Natalie's gone to the other group. Am I still sharing my slides? I'm not, am I?
No.
Oh, do you want me to share mine?
I can bring them back up. That's not a problem at all. And I'll bring them up from the main one. And Claire, if you're able to make notes just on the Google sheet, is that okay?
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
Yeah, fantastic. Yep. So did anyone have any thoughts about the products you've seen, about the briefs that we've introduced?
A lot of the products were, I think I follow Precious Plastics, if anyone's looked at them, and they do open source. And actually the plastic processing equipment I worked on in Indonesia was based on Precious Plastics. So those little cups that you'd show, I've got one in my kitchen that I've made.
Fantastic.
And what I'd love to do is set up a workshop doing that in Southend.
Mm-hmm.
I think the focus at the moment, from what we've seen so far, has been on the collection side.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's no issue from what I see in terms of the large volume of material being available. And I'd like to set up a little workshop that actually processes those material back into a product. Mm-hmm. I've not worked out what that product is yet, but I think that's the important bit. We do
when you were talking about how it would be like maybe a muddy brown or like a black color, you can very obviously paint a lot of plastics, various colors and things like that to get a desired effect. Or you can even like plasti dip and things like that to get textures and colors and unique. So the color, I don't think is much of a limiting factor. Do you know what I mean? Because if you want something that's blue, you can always paint it blue.
Can you add pigment as well if you're doing remelt?
So with Refloat, which is a recycling filament company, their dyed recycled filaments are 98% the plastic and 2% dye. That's the ratio they go for. They're doing PETG and PLA, but I imagine it would work similarly for PP.
Mm-hmm. So one thing just to note there, obviously, definitely valid in terms of adding additional pigments or painting. What we obviously wouldn't want to do is do anything to the products or materials that would stop them from then being recycled again, because we very much want to focus on having a life beyond that second life. But it's definitely valid as something to consider, and especially if it's something that can then be removed possibly, or not affect the recycling process down the line, definitely. And Gordon, interesting you mentioned there about precious plastics. My background has been a lot working with the remanufacture of products made from fishing waste from the marine industry, and in a lot of small scale projects similar to you mentioned about Indonesia. I've worked in the Maldives on a precious plastics facility there.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of my kind of I guess the motivation and feeling about it is that a lot of the time manufacturers will say that they can't work with regrind, that it's too difficult to use because they're used to this perfect pellet. But I think the precious plastic machineries provide an alternative to that, and that's something that we definitely would looking at a way that is the material ground on mass and then potentially going into a precious plastic facility that could do that? I think that'd definitely be something, an interesting conversation to have if you'd be interested in that.
I'd love to. And that's it. So with my Veolia hat on, I can go to Dagenham to the HDPE processing plant that's taking milk bottles back into milk bottles effectively. And that's just a completely different world. That's really a lot of material that's gone in, a lot of sorting of material, a lot of capital. And then you go to precious plastics, it's just a complete different scale. And it's the precious plastic side of stuff that excites me more than the big, expensive plants.
Brilliant.
Would you set that up, Gordon? Would you set it up in the in somewhere like the reuse? Because you've got the reuse area at the Stock Road site, haven't you?
We have. The problem is there's not the space to do it. There might be next door, but we need to have a chat with Imran about that and whether in Veolia, whether that would be suitable. The ideal thing is an industrial unit to do it in, because then it's, you know, it's dry and it's contained and all that stuff.
And I think what you've touched on there is that, especially mentioning the Veolia facility and producing things like milk bottles, they actually have quite a nice sort of system there that you almost don't want to touch, because and we spoke about this at length when developing the plastics that could be collected. And milk bottles, actually, if you can make more milk bottles from them, that's actually quite good.
Yeah.
And that's why we've gone to focusing on a lot more of those currently not recycled en masse rigid plastics. So no, brilliant. It's great to hear about the precious plastics as well.
You can also do things to change the properties of plastics. We have a plastic that's magnetic, for example, by mixing in small amounts of metal powders and things like that. We also have one that rusts like iron because it has iron mixed in with it. I think it's a 28% mix to plastic. So you can mix things in with it. And obviously raw metals aren't going to be that harmful to create like specific processes you want. So if you need a magnetic switch, you could build that with magnetic plastic.
The only problem is the then recycling of that material after the end of its life is perhaps more complex.
This is the thing that often comes into it. There's obviously there's lots of different applications and lots of different people experimenting with it. So it's really interesting to hear from both of that. I was just wondering if anyone else in the room had any thoughts about the briefs or anything we've discussed. There's a few people obviously with their cameras off.
Hello, Jake. Sakshi here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm an interior designer by profession and studying project management at the University of Essex, Southend campus.
Fantastic.
Like I've been here for the past 4 months already. Before that, I was in India, and I could come up with 2 suggestions. Like it generally rains here, so yeah. So how about creating some rain shed areas, or maybe just an umbrella sort of a sculpture on the high street or on the seafront, you know, because people love being outdoors, and it just starts to drizzle at times. So at least they would get some shelter to just get in there for a couple of minutes. And then by the time the rain is over, they can get back. So first of all, they enjoy nature, they're under the shelter, and then, yeah, it's like mix of both. This is one thing that I could come up with. The other thing that I really think here is like, because the climate is such, so when it's winter months, there are no leaves, the green area is pretty less. How about we make vertical gardens here? Because that will really impact the beautification of the city, as well as the psychological impact on people. Because when it's gloomy, it really impacts the psychology. When you see greens, you see nice flowers, it you know, it gives you that feeling of positivity. It elevates you. So it'll really impact the entire society as a whole. And yeah, it'll be like I mean, it's just a happy-go-lucky feeling that I think. So yeah, I could come up with these 2 ideas.
Yeah,
It's Claire here. We looked at living walls, Jake, earlier on in the project, didn't we? So you can producing living walls from recycled plastic as a potential product that we could make. I think it's a lovely idea. I really do, and I think a lot. You're right in saying that, Sashi, that a lot can be done to help people shelter from bad weather and also from hot weather as well, because we get a lot of visitors in Southend, and I think that.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone. So there's a bit of a conversation still going on in our room, but we'll give an opportunity to pick up on any other conversations later on. Hope everyone had a good bit of a chat there. what we're going to do now, and we're going to allow for some time for questions in a moment or a little bit later on. Conscious that we haven't got long left, and we've got Ben from 3D Filaprint with us. Now Ben's going to be doing a bit more of an example with the team at the second workshop in person at the Hive, but has got a bit of a presentation now just to talk through and introduce himself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pass over to Ben.
Do you want me to skip the video for time?
You are fine for time. You have, say, 12 minutes. Is that okay?
That's okay. I'll put that up then. Yeah, so we're going to 3D Filaprint. We're a 3D printing company based in Southend. We're the largest UK supplier of 3D printing materials. And we offer multiple brands and multiple different types of recycled materials, biodegradable materials, recyclable materials, so like circular economy stuff. We're going to be showing a machine that will actually turning the plastic regrinds from, what is the recycling agency you're using, Jake?
Van Werven.
From Van Werven. We'll be turning it into recycled spool, and then we'll be printing with that live. So we'll be showing you the whole process from grinds to filament to finished object. We'll make a coaster or a little toy boat or something. I haven't decided yet. And that's what we're going to show at the Hive. Sorry, I'm just loading up the video. Did everyone see okay?
Yes. Thank you. I think it's still muted at the moment on your.
Yeah, we've got no sound.
Might need to just turn it up on your YouTube there.
When you share, you need to press the share sound button. So if you unshare and reshare, it's on the bottom left.
Do that. My bad. Apology, everyone. Good?
Yes, we're good.
At 3D Filaprint, we create all different sorts of designs for all different kind of customers, like from hobbyists to any professional level or functional prototypes. Anything can be covered in this, and it can be created for any industry you can think of.
Hi, I'm Tim from 3D Filaprint. We do lots of types of printing, from SLS, which is powder printing. We do desktop printing, and we also do resin printing. The desktop printing is the one that it's grown in leaps and bounds, in that you can use desktop printing in lots of areas, purely because the plastic materials have changed. And that side of the business, you can create just about anything that you really can think of in terms of, you want to create a prototype or replacement parts.
It often happens with very old and rare parts where you don't have a complete part. I often use old drawings that I can locate, even sometimes photos. For many parts that are bespoke or that you may need a very highly modified version of, it's very often these days the only way of doing it. If you look at previous methods, traditional methods, you have to create maybe a mold or have tooling set up, and by the time that is in place, a 3D printing outlet could have produced a number of the parts already.
What you guys see behind us right now is different materials showcasing and 3D printed. Because we do so much exhibitions in school, colleges, trying to inspire kids as well in a way. So we print all these models to show them that what it is or what can be produced. So we do materials like wood-based material, metal-based materials, flexible materials, high-strength materials, nylons, which can be used into functional parts and potentially can be used directly into a working environment.
With SLS printing, it's called selective laser sintering. It's a way of fusing nylon powder together, which gives you high-strength parts that you could use on prototyping in many different industries. Vehicle manufacturer, it could be in the marine industry. We have materials that are flexible conductive, the plastic conductive materials. We have materials based on ESD, electric static discharge type of materials that you could use for jigs and electrical components.
It's like a new tool in your toolbox. It doesn't replace all your existing tools. It is a brand new tool that can do a whole lot of other things that you previously could not do It is becoming much more now. It is maturing into a formidable manufacturing discipline. It is extremely cost effective in the instance of low volume, high value, very complex items. 3D printing democratizes manufacturing because the barrier of entry has been lowered. You could potentially have a workable product long before a big company who goes through the traditional methods may have their first version. Small companies may use it for prototyping. Large companies may use it literally to build Formula One cars. We see Bugatti, for instance, printing a brake caliper. For the first time ever, a caliper that is massive, weighs almost nothing and is really strong. Companies of all sizes can benefit potentially from 3D printing. You don't have to be Boeing to really benefit from it.
So from anything, from a concept design to a 3D functional part, basically holding in your hand, you can have it.
That isn't displaying properly. 1 moment. Is that okay? Perfect. So who we are, we have over 8 years experience in the 3D printing industry. We work with a wide array of materials, loads of different recyclables, recycled biodegradables I mentioned before. We're the largest supplier of 3D printing materials, accessories and things in the UK. And we supply to education, such as like primary schools all the way up to universities, medical, everything from nursing homes up to like hospitals. We work with individuals like hobbyists and like single person businesses, all the way up to large multi-billion multinational corporation. And we're based in Southend. We can create low volume parts and production for reducing waste. So let's say you've got a really complicated CNC lathe, or even just you want to make a mold for candles. We can produce one piece for you for that piece of equipment so that it doesn't have to be thrown away. That can reduce waste, that can help environmental concerns. We can provide cost-effective design and print service. So we can design models that you can print with your machines, or you can give us models that you've made and we can print, or you can come to us with an idea, just a sketch on a piece of paper, or a design that you've come up with. And one of our designers can create that into a 3D model, and we can pick out the best material for whatever use case you need and print it. So we can supply you with a 3D printer, and we can also deliver the models to you. So it's not just like a local collection thing. We can post them all over the world for whatever you need to be made. And once you've paid for a model to be made, that's your model. So if you want to come back to us to get another one printed, we don't charge for design services multiple times. So we offer 2 primary kinds of recycling materials. We have PLA, which is a biodegradable recycled material. Comes in 8 different recycled types, and we have over 17 different colors from various manufacturers. So as Jake was saying, with the material they're getting from the recycling place they're using, their one isn't necessarily color-wise pure, whereas these ones, they're mixing dyes into them. You can get them natural, as it's called, which is without any dyes added to it. And it's with the PLA, it's more of like a milky white sort of color. And we're able to offer a bunch of different colors for that from various manufacturers, and they've all got slightly different properties that we can look into for whatever you need. But the primary recycling material is PETG. It's a higher strength than PLA. It is also biodegradable, but takes far longer to biodegrade. We have 2 different recycled types of PETG. One of them being from Reflow, the company I mentioned earlier. They are a really big company in the recycled filaments market, and they're able to offer like really, really nice translucent recycled materials. So you can get like a translucent red, so you can have like lights going through it and things like that, and translucent yellows and things like that. And it's very impressive. I can't. And we're able to print these for you, or we can sell you these materials that you can then make your products out of with your machines, or whatever you'd want to do. So we can supply everywhere down the chain. Now, 3D printing can actually be used to reduce waste. You can create replacement parts for equipment, such as I was mentioning before, or for things that were going to be broken down and thrown away. Because you can print parts that can take tons of weight. We printed off a brick that we ran over with a flatbed truck with a van on the back and with the whole weight on it, and it didn't break. Like you can do actual machined parts, not actual machined parts. You can do parts for machines using 3D printing. If you're clever, you can reduce materials, such as with the infill that I've shown in the top right corner. You can see that you can fill in an object, not 100%, but it will still maintain a majority of its strength. So you can work out, while filling the space that it needs, like the best strength to materials ratio. So if you're using something that is not as environmentally friendly, such as ABS plastic, but you want to make it, it's the only thing that will work for that situation, but you want to make it as good as possible, you can reduce the infill to make it a less solid object without losing a significant amount of strength. We also have, you're also able to recycle a lot of the materials that we can print for you or we can sell to you back into other things. There's also support material where objects that have overhangs, it would fall. So you can print with a sort of like a support, if that makes sense, like a little beam. Those are often a waste material of 3D printing, and you get empty spools such as this, the material comes on. These can be made out of a wide variety of things. So a lot of companies such as ourselves are moving towards cardboard because obviously it's more sustainable as opposed to things like ABS or PETG, although both are recyclable. What we will be doing at the PlastiCity in March 9th, so we'll be showing 3D printers in action. We'll be showing the process of how to load it, how 3D models work, where you can get them, where you can make them. It's the software side of it. It's so much easier than it was 5 years ago. Like, you don't have to be a programmer to know how to use a 3D printer. I've had no modeling experience before I came and worked here. And within about 2 months, I produced my own model and printed it. And that wasn't with me training all day. I'm not a designer or a 3D modeler. That's not my background. It was just like, as someone who was working around this, I was able to understand and learn. We'll be showing 2 pieces of equipment here. The 3D Evo. It grinds up the plastic into a powder. So we'll be taking the regrinds from the recycling place that Jacob mentioned, and we'll be turning that into a powder, which will then be being turned into filament by the machine. And this is a machine you can buy as a whole unit. It's not assembled or anything, and it has everything you need in it. It has the grinder in it, it has the stringer in it. You put the spool on, you load it up, and you're creating your own material. This can be useful not just for recycling, but like, for example, if you're making a recycled material, but as they were saying before, you wanted to have a mixture to get a certain color, like you wanted to add a dye or something, you could do that with this. Or you wanted to mix something in like virgin plastic to make it stronger or get more of a desirable aspect of the virgin plastic that the recycled stuff doesn't have. You can mix that in with the grind, so you can make it 50% or 80% or 98%, for example, as Reflow does with their dyeing. And we're bringing along loads of demos of various PLAs, PETGs, other materials that we have to show you what we can make and what people have made with these materials, recycled, biodegradables, and recyclables. We can show you demonstrations, everything from coasters up to candle molds, up to prototypes of aeroplanes. And you can make this as a single unit, or you can make batches of them. There are machines that have like conveyor belts on them, so you can just be producing parts constantly. Any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Ben. I think there was a couple of questions in the chat that I'll just quickly.
Oh, sorry, I'm not able to see those.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'll just read them to you quickly now. Michelle asked, do you have machines that can make the 3D printer filament spools? We would like to make our own, so actually making the spools themselves.
So we don't sell them directly, but we do have equipment like the 3D Evo, and we can put you in contact with them. They are a few £1,000s, but they're not like £20,000, if you know what I mean. Like, the price of these things is coming down quite a lot, and there are alternatives. It's not very difficult to build your own spool creator, filament creator device with only like £250. People seem to have been able to self-assemble them. That is more of a DIY integrated process.
Michelle, does that answer your question?
Hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yes. Well, probably if you're going to be at the second workshop, Ben, I'd like to chat to you a bit more about that, specifically the DIY version. So obviously schools, have got limited budgets. So we'd like a few machines. So
there are some really, really good community-made tutorials and guides that literally they list out everything you need to buy which comes to about £250 or $250. I can't remember off the top of my head. And it tells you how to assemble them. Sometimes they require you to have a few 3D printed parts in the mix to put it together. But there's a few different designs, definitely things you can look at.
Perfect, thank you.
Brilliant. And Claire has asked, did you say that you recycle spools?
The spools.
The spools.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
When you finished using the spools that you were talking about before, do you recycle those again? I didn't catch that.
So for some of them, like cardboard and PETG, we do currently recycle them, or we also sell them to people. When I say sell, we just give them away for free for people to use them. So we've had people use them on art projects and things like that to try and get more reuse out of them. But a big important thing for us is moving towards cardboard spools, so we're not bringing more plastic waste than there needs to be. But ABS and things like that can be recycled, yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And we end up with a lot of spools, and a lot of our customers do. We're currently looking at various ways. We're trying to figure out better ways to deal with spools and maybe taking them back from customers and things like that, like you were talking about with the circular economy. Because you can 3D print ABS. It's not the most popular material to use, but it can be done.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. That's really useful. And I hope for everyone that kind of gives it an example of someone that is operating locally in Southend, that is using recycled plastic and actually selling it as a filament, but also using it in their own operations. And also how 3D printing can be used as a technique to extend the life of existing products and limit the amount of unnecessary plastic being put out into the world. So thank you, Ben, really, really useful. Just to finish up then, because we said we would only keep you till 4 o'clock, and thank you all for sticking with us this long. I just want to say thank you.
Sorry, Jake, one very, very quick question, which we should do for Claire. If you can unshare, if we can get everybody on camera and take a very quick photo, that'd be very good for Interreg.
Aha, yes, I shall. Well, just while we're there, there's the contact details if anyone wants to take them down. We will be sending out the slides as well, and you'll have all the contact details, because then I've got no more need to share the slides again after this. And while David is getting ready to take a photo and everyone popping their cameras on, if you have got any more questions about anything we've spoken about, either pop them in the chat, or in just a moment I'll answer those for you.
Brilliant. I think we're nearly there with everybody. If everyone would like to give a nice little wave, that would be lovely. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Definitely useful to have some to show the partners on the project, everyone that's come along today. So thank you for joining us. Was there anyone who had any more questions about anything we discussed, the design briefs? Claire's popped her hand up. I think Claire's got something to say as well.
Oh, no, it's really good today. One thing I wanted to ask was, I noticed that Paul's here from Essex Injection Moulding, and we spoke a little while ago about some projects that you've been working on with recycled plastics. I think making pegs with another local company. I think that's a really interesting project. I don't know if you could sort of say a couple of bits about it. Or you're on mute, Paul.
We're on mute. I think Silver's had a question as well, Jake.
Paul, you're on mute.
Paul's still on mute, so he gave us a little demonstration of the pegs in the workshop.
Oh, that's better. That's better. Yeah. I mean, one of them is the it's a closed peg that we do for a customer that's made from reclaimed plastics, and we've recently done another new project which is for a local company in Southend as well. I'm not going to share it with you right now because even they haven't got them yet. We haven't delivered the first product to them. We've only just finished making them. But yeah, that's also made from using the ocean waste material. So that is, that's quite a good thing to do that, really. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, sorry, go on.
I was going to ask you about the quality of the material for the feedstock. You say it's ocean plastic, so I wondered what the quality.
Well, the difference is, what I explained in the chat room is there's a big difference between the regrind material that was shown in the video that I was talking about, as opposed to what we use, which is a reprocessed material. So basically, it would be the reground regrind material that is then reprocessed into plastic pellets, the same as a virgin material. That then gives us what we need as injection molders as a consistent material to actually process. I mean, we can process the regrind material in its raw state, but that does create an awful lot of problems, and you do have a lot of quality issues and a lot of quality problems using it. Whereas once it's reprocessed, they then put additives back into it, which then obviously makes the quality much better and it makes it more usable. I mean, the other one we do very briefly, we use a reprocessed black polypropylene, but the feedstock from that is basically car batteries. So it's car batteries that have been chopped up and reprocessed, and then we can make within reason anything out of that. I mean, one of the products, a lot of the products we do is pest control products. So things like sort of rat boxes and mouse boxes that you'll see outside every restaurant, industrial estate, wherever you go in the world. And most of those are actually made here in Southend. But a lot of the feedstock is actually it's not all car batteries, but one of the suppliers we use, that is generally what their feedstock is used car batteries. But it is reprocessed rather than just regrind.
So you've got quite a few projects going on.
We don't actually make and sell anything of our own. So we just manufacture for other people. So we make things for a broad customer range. You know, we make things for the aircraft industry, pest control industry, hi-fi industry, all sorts of different things. So we just purely make things for other people. So we don't have products of our own, but we do actually do the design and tool making on site as well. So customers will come to us with their ideas and then we make them happen. We will actually help design the product, design the mold tool, make the mold tool, and then actually produce the parts, package them and pass them on.
Okay, it sounds like you've got a bit of demand for using recycled feedstock as well.
To a degree, the issue always comes down to cost and quality. Because the recycled material and reprocessed material just doesn't have the same qualities and properties as a virgin material. So it's all about what you're using. I mean, for this one, obviously the example of the clothes peg, I mean, that's absolutely fine for the using that. But for example, the aircraft industry, things we make for them, they wouldn't even entertain it because it's all got to be fully certified and good quality traceability and all that kind of stuff. So it's all about what you're going to use the product for. Whether you can use recycled reprocessed materials, but there is a big market there for it, but a lot of people don't want to use it because of the lack of technical background to it, and because it's not that consistent, and so it's limited in what you can do. But there are lots of things, a lot more things could be done than what are at the moment, definitely.
Fascinating. I'll leave. Tracy's got a question, and I think there was another one.
Yeah, Tracy.
Yeah, can I just ask with the project? I know you probably do this more with the next workshop, but is there the opportunity, do you think, for collaboration? So, you know, with other designers collaborating together. So, say, for example, I'm more a surface material designer who's collaborated before with manufacturers and with sort of other designers like product designers. I didn't know whether that was something that might come out of this project.
It is definitely, and I think as Paul's just mentioned there as well, from his background as a company, that they don't design the products themselves. They can design the molds and the tooling to be able to do that and actually execute it. They'll be working with product designers and other companies who have got the concepts and all of that sort of thing. And it's very much what we want to do with this project. It's definitely about trying to link together all the different people who've got all of the right ideas or the right skills, but for some reason until now those things haven't quite locked together, and that's what we're trying to facilitate is making all of those connections with the right material to actually get it properly reused into new products. So definitely multiple designers and manufacturers, processes as was mentioned as well. You know, is it a case of taking this regrind and actually maybe it does need to be more refined into a process pellet before a certain manufacturing process can happen? Linking together all of those people is what we want to do.
Good.
Was there another question? I did see another hand go up earlier, but I can't quite remember what it was.
Silvers, I think.
Yeah, it was me. Sorry, just to ask, what is the software you use to produce these plastics? So what is how do you link it from the computer to the machine? to make them.
Was that a question about the 3D printing more?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, so there's some manufacturers of the machines come out with their own software, and such as FlashForge, which is a very nice all-round package. But there's also open source ones like Ultimaker's Cura, which they do make their own machines, but you can use that on loads and loads of machines. People make their own profiles to create that. If you're talking about making the physical 3D models, there's Blender, there's Tinkercad if you want to get more like entry level and things like that. That you can go all the way up from drawing it with like a pen on a tablet to like just like typing in code for like the basic shape of what you want. Like you can get really in depth. There's software for like every level of what you need. You take your model, you put that into the software, it's called a slicer, it cuts it into layers, and then that is the instructions for the printer.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm just about to test out Cura this afternoon, Ben. We've got an Ultimaker 3 and we're running an event this evening.
Well, if you need anything, feel free to give us a call.
Fantastic. And as Ben mentioned, they'll be doing a bit more of a demo of kind of the 3D Evo equipment and how 3D printing kind of can all link these things together.
Yeah, we'll show how the software works. We'll do a little thing where we walk through the whole thing while the show's going on, sort of thing.
Brilliant. Okay.
We'll bring it as.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's presented, everyone who's come along today. Hopefully you feel inspired to come along to the second workshop, which we'll send details out after this, where we'll really be getting into the design, starting to try and develop some of those concepts. But if you do have any questions in the meantime, hopefully you've got our contact details, and again we'll follow up with those if there's anything you want to discuss in between. So thank you all, and see you later.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
you.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.